What's up, guys? Spin Firearms here, and today we're going to be talking about Glocks Gen 3 versus the Gen 5s. Now, there are Gen 4s as well. I only have one Gen 4. It's a Glock 33 chamber and 357 SIG. It's basically the same size handgun, but in 357 SIG. Now, the reason why we're just comparing these two instead of Gen 4s are basically Gen 3s with removable back straps. Obviously, they had a couple changes in terms of the extractors, guide rods, that whole sort of thing. But across the subcompact line, they basically stayed the exact same. And because I'm going to start doing this, every time I talk about Glocks, because people, for whatever reason don't like Glocks, I will show you guys another option that is similar, but not a Glock. And today's option is going to be the FNS 9C from FN. You can get these in 40, 9mm. They are subcompacts, 12 plus 1 in this setup right here. Actually a pretty nice handgun that's actually been growing on me. So that is the FNS 9C. Anyways, Gen 3s basically are never going to be MOS. You would have to send your slide away, so you will never find an optics-ready Gen 3. Gen 3s, though, are the only Glocks allowed on the roster in California. That's why they are still in production, and they had less problems than the Gen 4s did, right? We all know that Glock did have a recall on their Gen 4s, right? It wasn't for any drop safety issues or anything like that, but they did have an issue, I believe, is on guide rods was their major one. Anyways, Gen 3s are the most tested Glocks on the market. The Glock 26, Glock 27 in this size came out between 1994 and 1996 for the two versions and have been doing great ever since. They've been law enforcement contracts, basically tested in the craziest capabilities, right? And it's done or tested for its crazy capabilities, and it has proven itself every step of the way. That's why I like my Gen 3s. People always ask, why Gen 3 over Gen 5? That's why I'm doing this video in the first place. They always see that I tend to be carrying a Gen 3 Glock 26, and they think, it's got to do with finger grooves. No, it's just I've always had Gen 3s because they've been around before the Gen 5s, and on top of that, they've just never let me down. You do see here and then, even though Glock is great and reliable, every company has lemons. And it just seems like the Gen 5s or the Gen 5 mags tend to be a little bit more finicky, as well as have a little bit more issues than you see with the Gen 3s and the fixed Gen 4s, right? Anyways, this is my first Glock 27 ever, and the number one thing I like about the Gen 3s is the finish. I do like the finish on these, even though as for a looks perspective, it looks better on a Gen 5. I do like this finish better. It just holds up through anything. I mean, I've beat the crap out of this handgun, and it's actually really held up in terms of the finish. You can see little markings and stuff, but, you can't really see it at a distance, and it is what it is. Doesn't matter. It's a carry gun. There are no rails on any subcompacts across the line. It's just plain and simple. And you can't find a Glock 33 in Gen 5s. Gen 5s have less models. That's another reason why you go with Gen 3 or Gen 4 is they have every model. Whereas the MOS system and the Gen 5s do not have every model. They just added the 29 and the 30 as of recent, right? Anyways, these are also skinnier. The Gen 3s are skinnier. And because people say they're blocks, they're not ergonomic, personally, I think they both feel really good in the hand. I do like the Gen 5's thickness a little bit better, and they are thicker. If you look up top, look at the slide, that does help with better recoil control as well. But overall concealability, smaller package, that whole sort of thing, it is going to go to the Gen 3s, but it's not by much. It doesn't really matter. They're all going to have the same capacity across models. All magazines are interchangeable across models, so it doesn't really matter in terms of that. I like the finish. I like the overall ergonomics. Like I said, I also just like the reliability and testing that's happened on them. In terms of the trigger, the Gen 5 has to win simply because of the performance trigger. Now, I know they allow the performance trigger in the Gen 4s, which sort of has me a little confused in terms of part compatibility, because technically on subcompacts, wouldn't that mean that can work in a Gen 3? So I'm actually going to be testing that this week. I'm going to see if the performance trigger at all can run in the Gen 3s over the Gen 4s. Anyways, having the performance trigger is a much better option than your average Glock trigger. It's just the perfect everyday carry trigger. But in terms of OEM triggers, I do like my Gen 3 triggers a little bit better. Super crisp and clean on this, barely any sponginess. I mean, it's just straight to the point. And there's no aftermarket parts on this whatsoever. So For some reason, my 26 and 27 Gen 3s, once they break in, they just absolutely rock. Gen 5s, like I said, you can find the MOS versions across the lines. I'm not sure if they have a 27 yet, or for the 29 or the 30, but I'm sure that will be coming if it already isn't a thing. But you're going to find MOS all over the place. You're going to find more options for night sights. You do have to pay extra, but you will see more packages like that. You'll also see certain packages like porting and, different paint colors and all sorts of stuff, Cerakotes, whatever, on the Gen 5s. Like I said, though, I do like the ergonomics of a Gen 5 better without the finger grooves, but finger grooves aren't terrible. My fingers never line up on them, if you see. It doesn't sit properly on them, so it feels sort of weird, but it's never really been an issue. There is no big difference. Chances are, if you buy a Glock, it's going to be reliable. The Gen 5s are a little heftier and thicker, which sort of doesn't make sense with the trend that firearms are heading in, but overall, they're both great. Now, the only issues I've had with problems with in terms of Glocks was a Glock 45, Gen 5, obviously, brand new. And that was simply because of mags, need to be broken in a little bit. Other than that, haven't had a single issue across the board. And in fact, this is my best shooting 40 in terms of accuracy. It's not my softest shooting 40, it's just my best shooting 40. Recoil is better on the Gen 5s. But for the average person, I feel like if you think this is already thick and too big and grippy, then I wouldn't go with the Gen 5. Gen 3s are going to be a little bit more comfortable in your hand. But more features for your Gen 3s, more holsters for your Gen 3s. One thing you'll notice is in order to make your holster work for both sizes, you can use a Gen 5, but if you have a Gen 3 and are going to Gen 5, you're going to have the Gen 5 first, is basically what I'm trying to say. But if you get a holster like this, which they don't make, unfortunately, anymore, it will fit both of them, no problem. Anyways, it's more, in terms of thickness, similar to the Glock 29 and Glock 30, which is pretty surprising, because for the Glock 30S and Glock 36, they went down to the average Glock 26 Gen 3 slide size. But overall, not big differences. Doesn't matter. It's all about how it feels in your hand and what you like. Personally, I do like Gen 3s more, but give me a Gen 5 any day of the week, I'm fine. Give me a Gen 4. They're all great handguns. You can't go wrong with either. But I will say that Glocks, overall, Gen 3 and Gen 4 have been around so much. Parts are everywhere. Holsters, it's crazy the part kits you can find for the Gen 3s and Gen 4s. You can go right now online and find $80 part kits for all OEM, everything. And have it to your doorstep in, 5 days or whatever the case may be. So that's where Gen 3 wins for a crap at the fan situation. I think overall, the Gen 3s are more perfected. Gen 5s are great as well. And you have the performance trigger and ambidextrous controls and all sorts of stuff like that. But for me, I do like the finish. Oh yeah, another thing, the finish wear. I've had this gun for less time. You can see that the barrel has a lot more wear. The slide has a lot more wear from holster. Where this has been shot up, 4 or 5 times more, and you barely got any markings whatsoever. And it's been holstered a million times. That's the difference in finish, as you see. So, overall, like I said, does not matter to me, but I am rocking out with my Gen 3s. Thanks for watching, guys.